I don't know if there's another console in the world that's both so loved and so hated at the same time. Xbox 360, a phenomenal console that wasn't just a portal to another gaming world, but captivates with its story, scandalous launch, red rings of death, piracy, but at the same time, the golden age of multiplayer, iconic exclusives, and that atmosphere you just can't recreate anymore. Plus, it's the only Xbox that managed to beat PlayStation, even if just for a short time. But they had to pay $4 billion for it. And why this happened, what problems Xbox 360 faced, which games became legends for it, and why years later it still brings back warm memories. I'll tell you in this video. Get comfortable, it's gonna be nostalgic and interesting. Let's go. Xbox 360 launched in November 2005, a whole year earlier than PlayStation 3. On one hand, this allowed them to take the lead while there were no competitors, but on the other, it led to rushed production, which turned into serious technical problems. The story of Xbox 360's beginning is inseparably connected to an unusual processor choice. And here's an interesting fact that few people know about. In my PlayStation 3 retrospective, I talked about how the cell processor, which was expected to be revolutionary, almost sank the PlayStation brand. But what's even more interesting is that essentially the same processor, just slightly modified, was installed in Xbox 360. Yeah, you heard that right. The processors of competing consoles have common roots because after a series of failures in finding partners, and remember, this was the early 2000s, people had heard about consoles, but nobody wanted to invest money in developing separate chips like they do now, so you either take what's available, like with the first Xbox, or develop it yourself like Sony did. But Microsoft wanted to come to everything ready-made, and after getting rejected for processor development first from Intel, then from AMD, they started looking at IBM, who were developing that same cell processor together with Sony and Toshiba. At IBM, they probably didn't want to bother much either, and just offered Microsoft a processor that was already in development, that same cell. You can only imagine how much Sony was burning from this. Picture this, you spend years developing secret technology, and your partner goes and sells it to your competitor. Microsoft, of course, tweaked it a bit for themselves, but overall, it's still the same cell, just with a simpler and more understandable architecture attached, so developers wouldn't have too much trouble porting games, plus a normal graphics core from ATI at an affordable price, not from NVIDIA, which always overpriced things. And here many people probably have a question. So why didn't Sony do it this way, and why did their games look like ancient Call of Duty at launch? It's all about the goals. Cell was developed as a multifunctional processor. That is, for servers and for players, TVs, and other electronics, which is why they made such a complex architecture so it would fit literally everything. Plus, as far as I understand, initially they wanted to hang graphics processing on it too, without an additional graphics core from NVIDIA, that is, making the first hybrid processor. But since deadlines were pressing, Xbox had already released their box and they couldn't solve all of Cell's problems in time, they just Frankensteined whatever chip they found. Microsoft made the processor only for consoles and threw away everything extra that Sony spent millions of dollars on, and initially planned to make a separate graphics core like on PC, so in some way Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 are brothers. By the way, have you ever thought about Xbox's strange naming, like why Xbox 360 and not Xbox 2? It's all because Sony was preparing to release PlayStation 3, and the number 2 in the Xbox name could indicate that Xbox was less cool than PlayStation. So they had to get creative with the number 360, full circle, new dimension, and all that. And most importantly, the first thing that catches your eye is the 3, just like PlayStation 3. Sounds forced, but in their defense, maybe they did the right thing, considering Nintendo Wii U's failure, which failed only because many thought it wasn't a new console or new generation, but an improved version of the regular Wii. The controllers from the previous generation even worked there. Anyway, there were problems with both naming and marketing. But let's get back to Xbox 360, which as I said came out a year earlier than PlayStation 3, and therefore was somewhat less technological. The first console models didn't have HDMI and output video through component IV cable. The cheapest configuration even had a wired controller. And only in 2007 was a new version released with the Zephyr board, which added an HDMI port. Maybe we should thank Sony for that, who released their console with HDMI right away. But unlike Sony, Microsoft immediately added software emulation of the first Xbox, not hardware like PlayStation 3 had, making the console's cost cheaper and as a result more attractive to buyers. Although in some ways they went overboard with cost cutting. The first models were missing a lot of things, for example, a built-in Wi-Fi module, and you had to buy a special adapter, which cost serious money, or a built-in power supply. It was external, but at least it came in the box. However, it was so huge and heavy that you could literally use it to fight off bandits like nunchucks. which of course didn't add to aesthetics, but you could change faceplates with different prints, like PlayStation 5 has now, and back then it looked pretty cool. So despite minor rough edges, on the surface, Microsoft was doing pretty well. Starting earlier than competitors, quite affordable price, and the console was attractive with powerful next-generation hardware. But inside Microsoft, they already knew about the approaching avalanche of complete failure. It wasn't uncommon then, walking through a shopping mall, to see this picture. There's a test Xbox 360 standing there, and it's completely empty around it. I mean, usually people stand there, play, test, but here there was nobody. The thing is, the console broke down, and probably not for the first time, since they didn't even bother replacing it. Or they replaced it, and the damn thing broke again. Microsoft tried to smooth things over, saying the console was in an anti-theft box, because of which it didn't get enough air, cooling suffered, and all that stuff. But after sales started, the problem became so massive that denying it was impossible. And why exactly 3 lights of death? Well, because one red light signaled a system error, often fixed by restarting. 2 red lights indicated some system problem without a specific error code, usually also solved by restarting or updating the system. 4 red lights seemed like the worst error. But no, it only meant there were problems with video output. That is, some problems with cables. But what you couldn't cure with a restart, at least not always, was those same 3 lights of death, meaning your console got processor overheating. At first, if you let the console cool down, some people even wrapped the console in a towel for this, Xbox 360 could work. But over time, that fatal moment would come when the console just wouldn't turn on anymore. The cell processor, that is PowerPC, was very hot, so much so that during long gaming sessions it literally melted the solder it was sitting on and the surrounding microchips. And after cooling, the solder would literally crumble, breaking the connection, so local craftsmen started installing more powerful coolers in the case. The console was even noisier then, but according to eyewitnesses, it worked normally. Or they'd attach bigger cooling with bigger bolts for better pressure, which could also help, though not 100%. But what was definitely 100%, you lost your warranty. But in 2006, there was no real warranty anyway. It lasted only 90 days, after which the console successfully died. Only 2 years later, Microsoft would admit the error was massive, and not only extend the warranty to 3 years, but also return money if you'd already spent on repairing their console. Though whether they returned money for such folk customization, history is silent. In total, Microsoft had to allocate a whole $1 billion to fix the screw-ups of their hasty start. This was an unprecedented decision and possibly the most expensive warranty case in gaming industry history. What could have buried the Xbox console forever, if at that moment Microsoft hadn't been almost a monopolist in the gaming console market at the beginning? Nintendo Wii, which came out later, aimed at a completely different league. And PlayStation 3 not only had a horse price tag of $600 at launch versus $400 for Xbox, but also suffered from overheating. Don't forget their chip has common roots, though PlayStation 3 didn't fall apart as much. So the choice was obvious to me, especially since Microsoft also replaced and repaired everything under warranty. The funniest thing was the theories about why the console was dying, and in some cases it got downright crazy when people believed that Satan himself had possessed the Xbox. And he broke it. I'm serious right now, not joking, so it literally became Satan's box. So in 2008, one woman even filed a lawsuit against Xbox claiming she had a seizure when she saw the 3 red indicators, and that it was Satan himself who had taken over the console. Although you can't rule out that she just wanted to earn compensation from a company that was already generously putting out the fire of their failure with money. And in the end, the situation was settled out of court. But the fact is still funny. What other console in human history can boast the title of Satan's box? Although there were objective downsides too. Well, besides the fact that consoles were flying to digital heaven with enviable regularity, this was paid online in games, while as I was correctly reminded under the PlayStation 3 video, online was free in all games there. On Xbox, even to play free games, you had to buy a subscription for online access, since this was presented as an innovation from Microsoft. Technically, online existed on the first Xbox too, but due to poor internet distribution in those years, according to official data, only 2 million people used it. Although for that time, that was also cool. It offered voice chat, friends list, and playing in few online games. That is, Xbox users could already then experience all the charm of voice chat, which we all hate so much here in the future. But with the release of Xbox 360 and native network access, the number of users grew exponentially. Just in the first month of sales, the number of users grew to 7 million, and naturally the servers didn't expect this, and right at Christmas they started crashing. It was quite a present, but Microsoft fixed it quickly and even managed to make money from it, creating a paid subscription that we all know as Live Gold. That is, initially it was supposed to be free, like on PlayStation, but Microsoft's weak servers ruined life not only for Xbox fans, but also for Sony fans, who also had to start paying for online access from the next generation. Essentially, there were two subscription versions: free, also known as silver, allowing you to use the store, buy games with add-ons, chat with friends, and everything that was originally on the first Xbox, well, except online games. Access to online was stuffed into Live Gold, which at that time cost $60 a year, but it also offered regular discounts on games, as well as one free game every month. But even so, many now remember with nostalgia those times when after school or work, they'd start up the console and spend hours hanging out in network battles with friends, or trolling random players online. YouTube was flooded with these videos back then.
Come to me, spanky, spanky.
But now, that atmosphere is remembered with warmth. Plus, this same subscription laid the foundation for achievements loved by many, since you could see them on your avatar and friends, and became the predecessor of Game Pass. But that was later. At first, not only the processors of 360 boxes were burning, but also one place of Microsoft company management who were somehow trying to put out this forest fire with a bottle of water. All this served as a reason to redesign the console, and in 2007, that is, just over a year later, release Xbox 360 Elite, which had more space for air circulation, better cooling, and it was black. I like the white one too, but the black one looks simply stunning. Plus, this update brought something that Microsoft still uses today: price segmentation. Essentially, there was a regular version for $400 and also arcade, that is the same thing but for $300, though now it didn't break as much. It also initially didn't have HDMI, came with a wired controller. And most importantly, there was no hard drive, memory was only internal at 256 megabytes, only for saves and such, and you were supposed to play from discs. Although you could buy an HDD separately for about $50 to $80, but it didn't come in the box. That's exactly why by 2008 the price dropped to $150. And the box included both HDMI and a regular wireless controller, but still without a hard drive. But overall, it was still the old console. They hastily gave it normal cooling, maybe some small internal redesign, but a truly new console only came out in 2010 under the name Xbox 360S. Overall, as I already said, both Sony and Microsoft's console launches didn't work out, and each started doing homework to make their console a bit better. So in 2009, Sony rolled out one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, PlayStation 3 Slim, and Microsoft presented Xbox 360S or Slim. Despite the console becoming physically smaller, it got better cooling and therefore no longer overheated. Designers were clearly trying back then, not like now, and so even after all these years, the design looks gorgeous. Though not everyone liked the touch power button, but this model became the first Xbox console with a built-in Wi-Fi module, no longer needed to pay extra for a separate adapter. Besides that, it got a special port for connecting Kinect without additional power, and the updated design itself, you can write in the comments which model you like most, by the way. And just when it seemed Microsoft was getting things together, parallel to all this chaos, Microsoft had another problem: pirates. From the very beginning, their console was being hacked. While PlayStation 3 only started getting hacked after 3 years, Xbox was already running unsigned games almost immediately. But for this, they used all available methods. Generally, after the first Xbox, which was essentially a regular PC and therefore was hacked easily, Xbox 360 engineers were given a clear task: prevent piracy. Spoiler. It didn't help much, but it seriously shook pirates' nerves. Hacking the console itself wasn't possible for a very long time, so at some point pirates gave up and switched to hacking less protected drives. And there it was, virgin territory. Microsoft tried to patch vulnerabilities with new revisions, and sometimes even within one revision there were different drives. But even they couldn't resist the charm of pirates, especially with a soldering iron in hand. And when something didn't work, you could just take a drive from an old console and not worry about it. Very often consoles were sold already hacked, and I know several people for whom this fact became decisive when choosing a console. I also remember we had tons of pirated discs for hacked boxes on classified boards, but stylized to look original. And then legitimate buyers would buy them and not understand why they didn't work on their consoles. But anyway, not the point. All this lasted 6 long years, until after this time, pirates found how to hack not only the drive, but the console itself. The main thing for us is that Xbox was hacked however you wanted, and sometimes even sold already hacked, which added quite a few fans and audience. But this didn't last forever, and with the release of the last revision of Xbox 360, all vulnerabilities were closed. So much so that for many years it couldn't be hacked at all. This revision was called Xbox 360E, where E stands for Exodus, which in Latin means end or exodus, because first, it's a console released at the end of the generation, and second, it brought an end to the dominance of pirates on Xbox 360, well, or the pirates left on their own. Because it came out at the end of the generation, almost together with Xbox One. And there Microsoft screwed up so badly that they still can't wash it off. But that's, as they say, another story. This model no longer offered anything revolutionary. It was created to harmonize with the design of the new Xbox One, and serve as a budget alternative for those who didn't want to move to the new generation. Besides the updated design, technically it differed little from the previous S model. Though funny enough, this year even this model was hacked, and that's software-wise, after a whole 20 years. But there was one more model that everyone forgot about, and it's a PC. Okay, just kidding, it's a custom case made by Lee & Lee Company that looks like a PC. It's bigger, more air, better cooling, you get it. Though I didn't understand here, was this a custom-ready console or just a case for self-assembly? But they were getting creative to keep consoles from burning however they could. Actually, this was exactly a case for self-assembly. You could disassemble your Xbox 360 and put its components in this case. It cost about $90 and indeed solved the overheating problem thanks to better ventilation. Among enthusiasts, this solution was popular, though it required certain skills to transfer all the parts. There were even versions with water cooling, judging by the holes for tube outlets. But the problem is that the thing is so rare and even vintage that finding it now is extremely problematic. But it shows how much people were ready to twist themselves to play on their console without problems, and there was plenty to play. Gears of War, one of the most popular games on Xbox 360, because it came out with the console, and back then that was cool. Even now Gears looks gorgeous, which makes it doubly sad that such a legendary exclusive after 20 years will come out on PlayStation 5 in a remaster, like everything Microsoft does now. But the console wasn't remembered only for Gears of War. Halo 3 became one of the best-selling games of the generation and a real system seller, both thanks to the story campaign finishing the trilogy, and thanks to multiplayer that many people got stuck in for nights. And stuck is putting it mildly. Online in the game stayed at high numbers right up to 2022, when they simply closed the servers to move the audience to the new generation of consoles with new Halo, an unpleasant situation, but fans decided not to go anywhere and started modding their boxes in protest to play on pirate servers, where online still exists. Also, many remember Fable 2 with nostalgia, which I haven't actually played, but it shot up as an excellent RPG, not to mention Left 4 Dead, Mass Effect, and many other games from third-party studios. Xbox 360 also became home to series like Forza Motorsport, which competed with Gran Turismo, and now its arcade version Forza Horizon is arguably the best arcade racing game ever. And this is just a small part of the games that came out then. There were even temporary exclusives like Alan Wake, Dead Rising with Crackdown, and many others. And, of course, you can't not mention Call of Duty, which gained incredible popularity in this generation, thanks to online mode and exclusive DLC, which came out first on Xbox, which now you can't even download for free because the store is shut down, so newcomers can't play them. For many, Xbox 360 is associated exactly with games that shaped modern game design. It was a time of experiments and bold ideas when studios weren't afraid to take risks yet. That's why games like Assassins came out, which Ubisoft is still milking. BioShock got its start in this generation, as did Dishonored, Dark Souls, Fallout 3 in its new updated form. This is of course not Xbox's merit, but the era and generation in general. But remembering that time with these games, you understand why even now with new consoles, 4K resolution, ray tracing, and everything else, you want to go back to the 7th generation. Sure, the graphics were worse there, only 30 FPS. But games were made with soul, though not always. On Xbox Series, there's of course backward compatibility, even with improvements, but even that doesn't give those feelings. Or maybe it's nostalgia. But that's not all Microsoft did revolutionary in that generation. Seeing the incredible success of Wii on the market, which was rapidly conquering the audience even though it came out last, other companies also wanted to bite off their piece of the pie. In PlayStation 3, I didn't go into detail about a similar update that simply copied Nintendo's revolutionary console. But Microsoft went a different way and didn't just decide to make separate trackable controllers like everyone else. They made a full camera for which you don't need anything. Well, except tons of free space to properly capture movements. A special trap was the built-in microphone, which not many people suspected, which nevertheless listened to you during the game. On the hype, they managed to sell a surprising number of Kinects, because it really was something new, not just a reworked idea of controllers from Nintendo Wii like Sony had. However, many advertising promises were never fulfilled. For example, Microsoft suggested buying Kinect to talk with artificial intelligence and interact through movements, like your digital friend. Need I say that in reality there was no such thing? But overall, there's not much to tell here either. Both Sony and Microsoft simply decided to make their answer to the then popular Wii, which even despite its technological backwardness since it was the weakest console, sold more than everyone. But that's Nintendo. They always make unique consoles that, contrary to common sense, sell like hotcakes so people can play Mario Kart and other arcade games. The main thing is that Kinect, though it sold at first, didn't gain wide popularity. And with Xbox One's release, everyone forgot about Kinect entirely. They of course tried to push it together with the console for an additional fee as a bundle, but this only caused irritation among buyers and ultimately choosing the competitor. With Xbox One, there's a separate story. Maybe we'll talk about it someday too. Nevertheless, despite lukewarm interest from gamers, the technology was so impressive that Microsoft even used it in their other products, for example, in Windows and for corporate solutions. Many interesting prototypes in robotics and machine learning were created based on Kinect, so calling this invention completely useless is also wrong. Xbox 360 wasn't just a gaming console, but a whole era in the industry. It brought revolutionary changes, defined standards for online gaming on consoles, and gave life to many iconic franchises. Despite all its problems, from red rings of death to lawsuits, it remains in the hearts of millions of gamers as one of the most important consoles in history, and one of Microsoft's most successful consoles. Even now, when technology has gone far ahead, there's something special about hearing the Xbox 360 startup sound, taking this controller in your hands, and diving into games that defined a whole generation. And I don't know if things were really better before or if it's nostalgia, but it was definitely more fun before. Now consoles come out almost simultaneously, have the same architecture, and even the same chip manufacturer. For users, this is only a plus. We get ready devices that aren't made in a rush, well, or at least don't come out as defective as the first revisions of old consoles. Games mostly look the same, and we essentially choose between ecosystems. But will this be interesting to talk about in 10 years? We'll find out in 10 years. And that's all. Thanks for watching to the end. It was very pleasant for me to return to childhood, remembering the iconic classics. And I hope for you too, so maybe I'll even do a retro review. I really want to dust off my box to see if they're still online there, on pirate servers, and much more. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos, and see you soon on this same channel.